it is another year, and therefore we have new information, new characters soon to be released, new viruses, and weakness. I'm sick, that's why. But we're still going to push through at least a bit and show off the next 8 bots on our setup. We made an error earlier without Giles, so we're going to work out how to deal with that a little bit later on. But Giles functionally pretty straightforward with this whole thing, because his skill doesn't affect much. So, we're going straight into this, starting from our Necalli bot 2.0, which is intentionally very hard to tell apart from our 1.0. And in fact, specifically, we do this version with his action off at first. So just to be clear on why that's happening. This bot is super simple. He generally won't do his V skill with that action off. So really I'm just demonstrating the fact that, hey, if you use him on the easiest mode, nothing happens whatsoever. You don't have the action on in the first place for it to affect. And the timing he actually does use the V skill for, basically the down-up jumping one, it should almost never result in him actually using his V skill. Even in the weirdest of situations, he probably isn't going to use it, due to his weird first frame up forward input things. Most likely he just spams this move therefore, but we can turn it on. So we're now going to turn on his action 2 and going to see what happens. And if I'm in and out, it's because, again, sick, so... Overall, Necalli bot 2 has a very specific set of things you're supposed to do. Namely, he does this guidance a lot, and you are supposed to punish this guidance with any combo you like actually. But the important thing is, you must not actually move after the punish. This is important because you have to get used to the idea that you have to hold your position and anti-air Necalli. Also, soar to reactively block. Without shifting from your position. And the thing you probably find most interesting about this is that as soon as Necalli has this ability, and you tell yourself, okay, I need to stay still in neutral and not move, you'll find that you don't block this guidance as often. Or that your anti-airs are mistimed. This is the common experience. This doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens to a lot of people. You can use this to watch all sorts of things, because while Necalli is down, you're not supposed to move. Therefore you can watch for when you flinch and move. You can watch for when you don't react to him doing the disguidance in time to block. You can watch for when you attempt to do this and get a counter hit instead, even though the move should generally be punishable. And you can watch for, hey, is this even helping because I keep on not blocking correctly, or keep on anti-airing incorrectly, or doing the wrong combo as the punish, and so on. Hence the differences in meter you are allowed to have. So you punish him, and then see if you can get yourself to just stand still. If you just stand still, see if you can manage to block the disc guidance afterwards. This is not really a requirement, you can just hold down that, but you're often missing out. Basically, the point of this is to add layers. The more layers you add, the harder it is. And eventually there now you have something that this bot benefits from quite a lot with the new V skill. He now gets to put something on the screen that not only changes his rhythm, But you don't just block at the same timing. You have an additional thing to place your attention on. And you can recognize that you can end up sometimes too close to him to, for example, block the disguise itself. After a while it's fine to actually move, especially if your character doesn't have a lot of punishes that put them far away, or generally has a punish for disguidance that is just so generally good that you always want to take advantage of it. But it's still in there. It's still information you need to pay attention to. As you can see, Necalli does in fact have different wake-ups. And those things in turn will change where you need to stand or to move when Necalli does get up. This sort of thing teaches you to watch for knockdowns. If you actually pay enough attention to this, it's fairly stressful. The anti-airs are not the hard part. They generally shouldn't be the hard part. If you're finding the anti-airs to be the hard part, you definitely should practice more without quite as many layers of focus. Generally, the anti-airs should be easy. The air reset should be at least somewhat easy. But it's always a good practice to help you get through all of the, hey, this happens at exactly this range sort of problems. And this is why we take away his meter, unlike other forms of Necalli bot where his main goal is to jump in and hit with super. This one's goal is more so to let you stack your own layers while thinking through things. He will not use his V skill to dial, and we definitely don't suggest putting him on V trigger for this purpose. But just utilize it and take advantage of the one additional thing he does now, which will make you have to think just a little bit more. If you prefer not to, one wheel just block, or even in some people's cases counter zone the V skill. You can do that totally for both V skills. The other one is easier. Then do that. For a final piece of challenge, when you do knock Necalli down and he ends up close to you, for some characters this is a lot, give him just long enough to see if he does something else, and you can add a hit confirm requirement to it. Usually with your crouch medium kick. If you realize there is no way I should be able to block this guidance from this range, and you've had time to think about the fact that you would not be able to block this guidance from that range, then you also have time to throw out your crouch medium kick. And your goal is generally to do that only in that situation. Though, see how much you can control yourself to not just do crouch medium kick in neutral because of spacing, but also because of situation. Despite being a very simple bot, your choice of how to train with this can go really deep. So do yourself a big favor and try not to overthink it. Because even though obviously intention here is to spend a lot of time focused on multiple layers, they do tend to come one at a time, and managing to edit your own thoughts down to the point where you are only thinking about a thing when it's time to think about the thing really helps. Like, helps to the point where you kick him out of EX. Oops. Not so much our regular disguises might, but you know, it's just there to remind you that you can do a lot of crazy things if you give yourself enough time. Air-to-airs are also okay, but not really the best thing to be using here. Other special move anti-airs are generally fun. If you have a character that just has a super consistent anti-air all of the time, just uppercuts all of the time, go ahead and do that. In fact, it helps a lot of players because of the fact that you are blocking, and some of us are not so good at doing uppercuts out of block. So training yourself to not block as much in order to get your uppercut off is still valid and useful training. You just have to realize and recognize what exactly you're working. Which brings us to our next bot. Another in the same vein. Nash bot is our autopilot bot, meaning that generally you're not supposed to think while you're fighting Nash bot at all, but you are supposed to watch. And that can be a little bit hard to understand, but learning to watch yourself is a really important skill in fighting games. To take your focus out of all of the physical things you've already learned how to do, that you know you're going to more or less do correctly.
I'll show no mercy.
And start focusing on why you're doing them, because you might be making terrible mistakes. Or getting frantic and having undertrained something where you need to have two different reactions, but stress makes you only have one, or you've never considered you need the second one. Our Nash bot, therefore, is affected by his V skill differently as well. Nash generally doesn't use his V skill very much. It's just not that relevant to most of what the bot does, and you don't end up seeing it because, depending on how you input him, he nearly never does this move. Which of course is good because it means he's nearly not affected. Something we find very helpful because he doesn't really do much of use with his skill in a bot form. It's not a helpful thing for him. Mostly you're just trying to anti-air him. And again, air resets, those sorts of things. Whatever you can find that helps you out in this matchup. But other matchups as well, because you don't always have the same types of anti-airs, and Nash moves himself around a lot in ways that would result in you having to carry, which is good. When he's in the trigger 2, this gets a little harder, but not enough to the point where you actually have to see something specific happen. He's about equally dangerous either way. We sometimes prefer to have him in trigger 1 just because it makes it a little bit easier to learn to counter it, but once you have learned to counter it, it's good to occasionally switch him up just because it becomes unfamiliar again. He's one of those characters that helps you train against people who jump from lots of different ranges, and even if they don't necessarily jump too much, something still happens. Since he only occasionally does his moonsault in certain inputs of him, in fact he just generally doesn't use that many specials at all. You're focused more on when you miss your anti-air because he didn't do enough, he didn't jump from as close as you thought, he jumped from closer than you thought, etc. And even though he most of the time does jump a lot, choosing the wrong anti-air generally fails against him on most characters. He's built such that if you choose the wrong anti-air, you should generally fail. Even if you don't necessarily fail in terms of how you hit him, it often messes up anything you could get along the lines of air resets. Oh, that's what they meant by that buff. Okay, I'll take it. That was not the buff I was thinking it was. This is a Chun-Li thing. I'm specifically referring to the fact that you counter hit people with that move. She now air juggles them out of the legs. So just something for Chun-Li players. It's a generality. I thought they meant something relative to comboing the move itself in terms of inputs. Maybe that's also in there. We'll see. My previous testing indicated it was. And that's actually kind of a good demonstration of how this bot's meant to be used. I've trained myself when fighting Nash bot to talk, to think about something else, to check on ideas, to listen to someone else talking. Now, to do all of that and still watch when you're making the mistake is in itself a challenge. And I must admit, I'm not doing that well at it today. Hopefully I'm just tired. But as you can see, he has basically not used that V-skill all but once, and that was because he got hit. This does depend on your input of Nashbot. Some people's Nashbot uses it at a good time, they use it in combos, combo timing at least. Mine does not generally. If I change his V trigger, he does get a little better timing for this. But not much. He also generally won't use one of the moves you're actually supposed to punish if he's in the other V triggers, so that's important as well. But again, it depends a lot on your Nashbot, and we know Nashbot is hard to input. But you can already see he will do more bullet E, he has more back dashes. There's definitely some changes that happen when that's not a move he has in his arsenal. Bots have a very specific rhythm that they are built to use, and Nash's often gets messed up by little things. That's basically to tell you that I'm not sure whether or not you specifically will have a Nash bot that does more things and uses more V skill when in V trigger 1 or in V trigger 2. That's a piece of information you probably have to test for yourself. Even like if you change whether or not Nash starts with meter, drastically changes how this bot works. So bear it in mind. Do whatever works for you normally, and if you find that the V skill 2 is not helping, then don't use it because it's not really there for anything that a bot would be able to use with any reading. There is probably a space in the bot where you could try to put it so that when he knocks you down, you would get the buff from it. Namely something just before the jump. Specifically, I would suggest putting it in the mashing of the medium kick, heavy kick, so he has at least a tiny chance of doing it when he's not in that target combo or when he knocks you down in his mid-range. But I can't necessarily think of any other times where it would be really useful. This version, as demonstrated, can do it, and you're much more likely to get it in this form than the other. So, do what works for you. But onward. To a bot that has been meaningfully changed, and I mean a lot, by the second V skill. Those of you who have heard me talk know that I play Kolin, that I mentioned at some point that I also play Shermie in King of Fighters. And I also mentioned at some point that I don't know whose idea this was, and I'm not sure if I should love them or be upset that they're going to make everyone hate me now. So yes, some very intelligent person at Capcom decided that Kolin needs to have a dashing command grab. A Shermie style dashing command grab does a knockdown. Okay. This is where I'm supposed to mimetically say I'm fine with that. But more accurately, it does change the bot to the point where we have considered a different point system for it. Because a lot of what this bot is about has to do with punishing and understanding the concept of how to play, or specifically not play, footsies against Kolin. Kolin was also designed with what we called a preliminary point system that we never changed from preliminary. At least not on the bot pages. We continued to use it as the main point system. But Kolin as a bot has always been the sort of thing where someone has to figure out what it is they want to do with the character. Fortunately, this move is still at least somewhat fair. I mean, depending on how you look at it. Our bot already does a lot of dash up grab things as is. So if you didn't have enough problems to deal with just by her doing her dash up grab things, now you have to worry about being in the wrong spacing overall. Other small buffs that matter are the fact that that move has been sped up, so now she actually tends to trade or hit it a bit better. But the bot doesn't necessarily spend a lot of time doing the grab. So it's not completely overwhelming to the point of being stupid. What is a bit of a problem is that the goals of the bot involve you trying to cross her up. And while the actual crossing up part is not so bad, it constantly makes you move into the range where she will do the thing. So, is it good, bad? It's hard to say. You generally wanted to stand there before. As a character, she was relatively easy to deal with because the spot most people wanted to stand at is a spot where Kolin has options, but not particularly good options. And if she takes too many of them, you get to jump. I guess they sort of fixed this because now she can do that instead. Now, it is true that it's not the worst of things. As I said, it is Shermie style, but Shermie used to be able to hold a half speed, so there was some problems there. However, it did have enough startup to be important. And Kolin is not quite the same. Because she is a pressury enough character and does enough weird movement things that you might consider, oh, I don't actually want to let her get this close to me. But at the same time, what else am I supposed to do? She will get there eventually. One thing that does help is realizing that one, it won't hit you if you're a blocker, like most command grabs. And two, if the player does it too much, it's not that helpful. It does do the knockdown, it is a good way to snatch out something, but it's not specifically that different from any other command grab, other than that she gets to do it from very slightly far away, and technically, depending on which character you will play, even that isn't necessarily true. So people have some really long range command grabs. One of the main things to consider, however, is of course the fact that your point system can't be the same if you don't have a free skill to block. The bot is, however, just useful enough in terms of how often she does it to help you get a good feeling for the maximum range of the move. So, it's still worth your time, especially if you expect to deal with this a lot. Given the general amount of higher level players who didn't necessarily like her parry, grounded parry a whole lot, it remains relatively unsafe, it does have some other issues, etc. But it is still important to think about, because if you can't get out of this move, and a lot of people are likely to use it, even if they, because of the same reason they basically just use the trigger 2 all the time, it's just, oh, more setups, or oh, this is easier, or oh, this has more mix-up stuff that other people might not be able to react to properly. All of those things are important to players, and therefore you need to be able to deal with it. So, take some time, learn about this move as a generality, using this. The bot, under almost all inputs, should be functional enough for you to learn whatever you need. And since she's generally not going to overdo the move, your main problem is managing to focus through all this while still doing the process things you need to do. Simply recognizing that she could do it in certain spaces is also enough to think about, like enough to understand that, hey, this matchup has changed for your character basically, because she has other things she can do. And then getting to the point of, oh, I really want to be out of here, but she has good chase on almost all of her moves, so I don't actually have an easy way to get out of here. This is a character who can take a lot of risks when she has a life lead, which is why you sometimes need to be able to jump at her. Another good way to look at it is when she has a meter in she does things. Which is also partially why the bot almost always has full meter. You set her to be. Aside from dealing with the super and the timings for the super, it's just a better understanding of how to fight Kolin as a whole to have to worry about the fact that she constantly has more meter than you. But overall, don't worry too much about it. She is definitely coded such that the timings for her actually using that move are relatively strict, and you're not likely to see it totally overwhelmingly often, which I guess might not be as helpful to certain people, but you generally wouldn't want to learn too much about it that way as a whole. There are ways to configure the bot to use it more often by turning off a different move. Specifically that one, the one that does the super. But it's not absolutely necessary to use to learn about it unless you really just want to look at it quickly. But of course, just to show that off as a general thing. We're going to turn off her action too, as we did with Necalli. This is mainly to change the way her rhythm works in terms of just general flows. Now this move has a long startup, enough so that if you decide to just play footsies with her, which you normally shouldn't do when she's using the other V trigger, you will probably win out and she will nearly never get to use it. So it kind of changes the matchup backward. And that can be useful to do, maybe if you trained to occasionally just switch which one you would use them. But you can easily see it here, yes. Most of her timings for when to use this move end up being hidden in her action key. So turn that one off. And things will shift. It mostly takes away the tail ball, in case you haven't noticed for just watching what it's usually taking away. She will still do the hail ball from other things, but certain things do shift out. She's more likely to jump than to dash, for example. And in a lot of the same cases, the situation shifts. I'm not specifically talking about the EX hail because the EX hail happens either way. But she has a light hail, and a throw, and a couple of other weird things that gets in there. She also has another throw, so you don't want to take away that either. So overall, yeah, just turn off action 2 and get what you can. She still won't necessarily use it that much unless you're really good at what you're trying to do. But she does use it in those situations where she has managed to either get a knockdown or gotten close to what is somewhat like a setup situation. And you're not thinking about the fact that, oh right, this character has a command grab now. It's still not going to be that often, but it should be enough to get closer to the feeling from a real match, to understand that she can do it like out of, depending on the input of your timing of your bot, she can do it out of jump setups. And if you focus therefore on your own cross-ups, what will often happen is that if you miss her in the air or she jumps at the moment you decide to jump and you end up on opposite sides of each other, you may, depending on your spacing, have to react very fast to what is going on. A lot of the threat of it goes away though because she doesn't have the random high counter that normally dealt with the cross-up. Still, again, if your goal is to learn how to deal with the throw, you don't need that as much, so you spend a lot more time in this situation. We do not suggest turning off her meter because it changes her rhythm enough that it doesn't help. The move does decent damage So you do have to care about it. Prioritize it as you prefer. But for now, we're going on. And we're going to look at Blanka. The challenge of Blanka is about understanding when his moves are in one form or another. You should continue to use V trigger 1, V trigger 2. Blanka does not necessarily do anything.
Experience the wilds the hard way.
Remember to always give yourself CA gauge for Blanka, but not to give Blanka his CA gauge. It's one of the few bots with this particular configuration, so we end up forgetting a lot. If you know your own combos well, this isn't usually hard. If you don't know your own combos well, he's a good bot to fight against because he makes you develop things like OSs and small tricks that he does. Now, his V skill is mostly hidden in some other things, and there's no real way to make it turn up more often. Generally, he didn't use it often before in most of the inputs of it. And he's not likely to start, honestly. This is probably fine as the move is... I don't want to say obnoxious because that's the nature of Blanka's moves in general. It's just very confusing as to what to do about it or when to expect it. In a way, therefore, it's kind of good that the bot won't use it, as it prevents you from getting an idea of, oh, the bot will want to use it at this timing. Or rather, players will want to use it at this time. They don't, they just use it whenever they want, so far as we've told. He probably has some complex setups for it, but we never give bots particularly complex setups, unless you absolutely will get wrecked by the character if you don't learn them. So overall, assume that that's in here somewhere. But just as you nearly never saw his coward crouch because he was too busy using those inputs to do other moves, you're very unlikely to ever see his Shout of Earth. There you go. He's at least done the job of demonstrating that it's in here. From testing, or rather from at least partially logistics, like understanding what he probably should do, that would be the timing he would do it. Which is a good timing. This is not to say this is in any way falling short. He has a lot of, I'm going to do Blanka Ball, and then, if you mess up your punish, I will do Shout of Earth. But this isn't really meaningful. He was already doing stuff like that. It's slightly better than the Coward Crouch in that spacing, but not a lot. So, it's up to you if you decide to do one thing or another. And I don't really feel as if the bot can teach you what you need to know about the move as a whole. So maybe try the CPU, maybe find a Blanka player, however rare those are for you in your area. And assuming that he was input in the standard way, expect to see a little of that sometimes. That said, Blanka bot is notoriously hard to input perfectly. One of the ones that most inspires us to just, can't we find a way to give these to other people directly? This is going to be a bit much. So don't be surprised if yours has a different behavior, but in general, he shouldn't spam this move on most ways he's been input. He just doesn't have the functionality for it in terms of rhythm. He may end up doing it fairly often after a Blanka ball relative to when you do certain things, but definitely expect that even if yours is not input that well, he's not going to be spamming this. Because the input where he does get it is a little too easy to... And even if he does, try fixing it, because it's really easy input, so it doesn't matter for most things. In fact, feel free to change around that input, at least somewhat, in order to get it, because it gives him a target combo that the bot never really uses. It's in there to give him as many options as possible and to have the timings be right. And it does a good enough job of that that there's really no reason to be concerned. Depending on how you held your last input for your first frame stuff, he will do it slightly more, but it definitely shouldn't be enough to be a problem. And it would be kind of hard to change him up so he doesn't, but you can try breaking his first frame on the input that one holds. I think is 2. I'm not looking at the screen right now, I really should be. Yeah, you can mess around with his action 2 in short, and hopefully something more useful will happen. But again, the move, like most Blanka moves, is somewhat quote-unquote obnoxious, and you won't necessarily know how to counter it or what to do about it, even if you have a lot of experience against it because of what players will use it for. It's like trying to deal with certain things Bong does. Technically, they're not specifically strong, nor are they specifically punishable, but understanding what to do with them based on experience isn't really a strong option. But honestly, that's about all we have to say about Blanka. Understanding what to do with Blanka bot is about punishing him at very specific timings and understanding why the punishes work and what you can do to optimize his punishes. So, him doing one more move when you fail the punish isn't really that meaningful for his design. Meaning we can move on to our demonstration of one of the variations on our Clawbot. Now, Claw is going to have a lot of differences in rhythm depending on which way you input him. If you've ever been on our Clawbot page, it is not really a mess, but if you don't understand a lot of bot theory, you won't understand why he's set up that way. Now, we all basically have different Clawbots. And this is somewhat important to understand when deciphering whether or not a change to the game has affected your bot specifically. I'm gonna put him maybe trigger 2 at first because of the way the timings go for this, and because I'm playing Chun-Li and she's not really affected too much by his V trigger 1. You'll understand that. If you don't understand why, then you probably don't have the Clawbot that goes with this character. Now he's the opposite of Blanka. He gets one gauge and not the other. I don't get any gauges. Sniff. But without going into too much detail as to exactly which differences exist... Oh, he's not on here. Okay then. That means it got wiped during that timing. And therefore we move on. This is a problem that happens sometimes when you're checking everywhere. Which means we will shoehorn him into the final stream. And you'll get to see the other demonstration there. And that means I'm going to start on the Zeku side myself. Even though this was going to be Kansukunai's playing against Zeku, I can start it off at this point because Zeku got really weird. Samurai Showdown fans probably will not find so, but for Street Fighter players, Zeku got really weird. And we're specifically going to put him in this stage because it's doubly confusing in this stage and therefore, you know, in character.
Allow me a moment to entertain you.
We are, however, going to leave him on his V-Trigger 1 because it really doesn't help to use his V-Trigger too much. The bot was designed with a very, very small chance that he'd make some use of that. But I think we actually ended up in the end not giving too much information, not giving it to him in any meaningful way, so he might just not have his V-Trigger and it doesn't matter what you choose. But if you as a player found a way to work it in, the timing for it is going to be around that. So, chasing down this character was already enough stress. He was generally not going to use his skill for anything. In fact, most inputs of him involve basically no use of this owl. He does have a variant in his option 2 as noted that can use it. But without it, he operates as he always does. So the only way we can actually show off how weird Zeku got is to go the other way. And again, we're doing this more so because you have to understand that if you did sneak in his V skill or V trigger, you would have put it into his variant of Action 2. His Action 2 variant is based around using EX Gram. You might also therefore want to figure out how to do it in more places because, as you can see, he actually has more than one of them. It's very thematically appropriate, I guess. He calls various creatures to help him out and just that. Why is this important to you? Because he covers the spaces that his character doesn't naturally cover. When he's older, he doesn't cover the air as well as you think. And if you put it in the same timing, then they tend to overlap a little bit. But technically that's a good thing. In general bot theory, it is better if you don't have a really strong use for the move in the bot. When two separate things have the same overall purpose but have different timings or ways that they need to be activated to be effective, you put them in the same input, not in separate inputs. Because what you want is that when it is used, there's a chance that your character is at a different space, and even if sometimes it's not helpful at all, the goal would be to make sure that you always have to think about it. So you can get pinned down by this bird a little bit if that is really on point. It works well against zoners, for example. And having to worry about the otter. I really should have paid more attention to what exactly the creature is when he's in young form. But the concept is the same. He will actually do it at around the same time if you snuck it in. So we're not going to try to do that now. But bear it in mind for when you do things yourself. So, given that that's really not that big a deal, let's move on. Now we'll lament the fact that I thought Clawbot was on here when he wasn't. On the other hand, it does let us shift one thing that was probably better off with her doing it anyway. Because I have had a little bit too much practice on Urien bot and his various craziness. Plus, technically Chun-Li having a faster crouch medium kick is just a little better at it.
Metro City Bay Area. Marine Kanzuki.
Plus you get to see one more aspect of it that is harder to show with Chun-Li, generally. Street Fighter 3 fans will know that basically he has the capacity to use a super in that game that empowers, or rather does, a more powerful projectile. That more powerful projectile now lives on in the shape of his V trigger, sorry, his V skill 2. I keep on doing that. Let's see. He always has a very strange setup for this because let's go with the easy difficulty because we don't want to spend too much time in the Aegis mode. We want him to actually use the other things. And let's put him at full V timer, because otherwise it's going to get complicated to explain. Those of you who have had other training levels with Urien bot know that this is not what Urien bot will normally look like, but the differences are not going to be that heavy, because of the main thing that the V skill does if you did work it in. But that's a big if, and as you can guess, it's not actually different. This is just us playing Urien things while I explain why it's different, rather than anything you should be looking out for. Specifically, Urien has a very complex way of trying to get in. We tell you it right in the beginning, rather than actually, like, as part of the inputs. But it is an entirely different look to it. Again, we're not really going to try to get this done on stream now. But what we are looking for here is, when does Urien actually use his projectile? That's the main thing you're focused on here. But if you're interested in how to get Urien to use his B skill and still keep your Urien bot functional, you do basically have to re-enter the entire thing, unfortunately, because he does have to end holding his medium punch at the end of a bunch of inputs. And the first input of action 1 does change. Fortunately, it's not terribly difficult to change. It depends on how good you are inputting his action 1 overall. His action 1 currently does a light kick, medium kick input. And you can change this to light kick, medium kick, and medium punch. The only reason we would not do this now, therefore, is that you have to also be holding medium punch at the end of a ton of other inputs for this to have any effect. Or rather, if you don't, he will spam the move, which isn't really what we want to show off today. But bear it in mind, it's mentioned at the end of the very long explanation at the top of the Urien bot page how to do it and all of the things you need to change in order for it to work. But again, we here are looking more so at when does Urien actually throw his projectiles in this bot. He's not built for that purpose. He's generally just not going to do it. You get him to do it by playing perfectly in specific spaces. So if you aren't necessarily finding yourself to be that great at Urien bot, but your input of Urien bot is good, it just doesn't come up. In order to activate it, in this case, for example, Kazuki Dynasty probably has to use her stand light kick because while she probably has practiced the whiff punish of the crouch medium kick with her own crouch medium kick, it's hard enough that you have to think about it a bit. You can't just like immediately come back into it. If you could, it would be a bit more pro, spending more time on the game. But as is now, we're more so simulating someone who just come back to your Urien bot to check, hey, did this change much? And the answer is mostly no. As you can see, mainly the timing for when he uses his move state cancels it. Meaning that mostly you don't have a good reason to think about this too much. Zoning Urien is not a thing we currently develop. We might come up with a secondary Urien bot based around this, but mostly this is just something for other zoners to worry about. If you were used to not having the problem in the matchup, or having a lot of options because whenever he wanted to do the multi-hit projectile he had to charge, then that does get to change. But you're not going to get a lot of difference out of Urien bot this way. You'll be back to the same old, hey, I need to stand here and be super calm for a really long time. And then hit one button. Particularly stressful if you couldn't afford to do it with a crouching button. And that's about it. We expect to see a new Urien bot at some point, if it turns out this still has a really big effect on most matchups. What will be important though, and we are glad is technically already in here, is any change to advantage based on that buff to it. If you did get in the modified version, because he cancels the projectile, that would be the thing you'd most easily see. He's likely to hit with crouching moves into projectile, and any difference in frame data should not necessarily immediately become apparent because he's Urien, but at least be there enough that you have to think about it. So bear it in mind. Generally, it will not change the rhythm for his almost non-existent overhead that you just saw. We did build the entire bot around the idea that, oh, you need to get points by punishing this overhead that he never does. Because honestly, that's what Footsies feels like a lot of the time. This is somewhat of an acquired taste, I guess you'd say. If you haven't really spent a lot of time trying to get everything you can out of your bot and understand why he's the way he is, I'm sure that all of this section is just noise to you because it's very difficult to see or understand what the bot is for, or how giving him extra moves at this point would change anything. But eventually, we hope that you do find a way to make it useful to you, even if he is somewhat hard to input sometimes. Even if for nothing else, then you get to deal with knee drop. If the only thing this bot teaches you is how to stand still in footsies and counter knee drop, it's still mostly done its job. Because that's mainly what it's for. In fact, this is partially useful because he generally doesn't do the projectiles. He's not as likely to quote-unquote waste the skill charge on the projectiles if you do give him the ability. And that fits a lot of the Urien model. A lot of people can play this character with nearly no zoning. And then put you in a situation where, oh right, he has a projectile, I should punish it, and then you've forgotten that, oh no, I can't do that. So hopefully it works out in a helpful way. Onward then! And as a result, we will once again have Hansuki Dynasty stay on for the purposes of a bot that was not necessarily going to be hers to deal with. But Kareen benefits a lot more from training him while his bot than Chun-Li does, and can show off a lot more things.
In chaos.
So let's take him back to
This would be perfect for a warm-up.
And we once again also leave him with this feature. You don't have to, but a lot of the things that he does are based around being able to counter you because you thought it was your turn, and the parry helps more with that than the other options do. Alex bot is all about air resets. And in terms of when he uses his V skill, once again, we're basically down to what's a V skill. This therefore is an exercise in understanding of a specific thing. Where in the Alex bot should you put the V-skill? We're going to eventually have some ideas on this, and it will depend on what type of character you actually play. But it's always been true that Alex bot has the capacity to charge his V-skill ability while doing a down back for something else. The problem is that all his down backs are very tight in terms of timing, then we didn't want to make even tighter inputs, because honestly, he's not that easy to input.
KO.
He also doesn't necessarily have all that many great places in the bot to try to put it. One of the good options is to add yet another hidden input to his action 4, but that action is stressful enough as is. So we need to do more research into how he can do this, when he can do this. Mostly though, it's not going to matter because our Alex bot is not really meant to be a bot that you spend a lot of time thinking about in that way. If you're facing an Alex player, they're either going to have pressure on you or beat you out in footsies because they have long ones. Alex bot therefore was eventually decided to be just, alright, Alex can be sometimes hard to anti-air, and then when you anti-air him, you might not get much advantage, so you should learn to do that. And that's how he became the air reset bot. But because your mindset is almost always going to be toward watching for something he's doing, or repositioning yourself to make it more possible, he's going to be similar to Sagat, where you don't give him a lot of time to do the move without getting him poked at or punished. The optimization therefore is to have him do it very seldom. You can do it after like his double backdash if you manage to input that part of it. And you can sneak it in to his input, the down back when you throw as well. But again, it's not necessarily going to be great. Those are your two main options. Put it in his action 4 after the forward jump triple kick, and try to manage to get even more things in there. And you can try the variant on his action 3. But again, this is increasing the complexity of the inputs, possibly changing the timing, though I expect not much. Basically, you would expect to do a backdash style input that is not really obvious here at all because it's not putting it in the same way for this bot. That was, I won't call it a fluke, but it's definitely very strict. In his action 3, you have the option to do the backdash with that type of input, with a back V trigger, back V trigger, back V trigger thing. And this is only going to work if you can input it at a certain speed. And then after all that, you have to do a charge timing. The good part is that the charge timing is where you can put it, you only need to press it once. Most of the time it will be hidden in the backdash. It may occasionally come out, depending on how you set it up. But then he'd still have a gigantic tell, specifically that he'd backdash and then do it. That said, if you consider Alex intimidating enough, it may work out simply because him back dashing. Normally doesn't mean that you get to do something right away. He might forward dash back into... He gets power bomb, he might throw his medium kick. You're generally not primed to go, oh, Alex did this move, now I can chase it. The problem is that you do have enough time to chase it. Whether or not that is a first order strategy being used by a lot of players, we haven't seen enough Alex players in the ranks that it matters to know. So, from the bot theory perspective, if you find yourself facing Alex's that bat dash in order to use his V skill, put it there. You should probably have tried to get the bat dash as the input for action 3 in the first place. And if that's not the Alex type you face, the type that only uses this move once he gets a knockdown and has complete confidence in pressure and other aspects of the game, that he will basically mow you down eventually with footsies and then get a big special combo without needing to use any specials until that point, then try putting it into action 4. There honestly isn't a lot more to this, but do remember what will happen if you put him into his B trigger too. So let's do that for a moment. Alex's B trigger 2 is fairly hit and miss with our bot, because it's based on the idea that he will A, not be crouching, and B, that he manages to land something specific. It doesn't have to be that specific, but it definitely doesn't help against the whole air reset idea. Not a lot anyway. You can interestingly see that despite having a lot of inputs of the trigger, the bot actually doesn't end up being able to use it that much. Mainly because the timings of the moves he does don't often or easily line up with the use of the B trigger. He has to land things that he's unlikely to land if you are using the bot for its normal purpose. That said, it is in there, and it can kill you. We just don't see it as something that has a purpose. Therefore, the only reason it's being brought up now is because it does change his rhythm a little bit. Instead of spending a lot of time coming at you constantly, he retreats more often, he has better general concepts of certain types of spacing, and functionally better footsies, but then therefore you end up mostly crouch blocking. Meaning that he's often going to win. This doesn't mean that it's useless to do. And in fact might be useful in the sense that if you do this and you have put the skill 2 in there, a lot of the time when he does this in the proper timing, it's because he did it from the upward ones. The rhythm should be a little better toward the use of this move. The problem is that he already has that sort of thing. Therefore we suggest it only because it's very likely that the sort of Alex who has the amount of faith in their flow to use their V skill 1 might also be the type of Alex that has the faith to use their V trigger 2. And getting used to the combination of those two things might be meaningful. That's about it, really. also helps prevent him from doing as many air knee smash and similar because the timing is different. Probably because of some input priority. And that brings us to our next character. Technically our last character. This is going to be short because we've already shown off Cammy Bot. We've already shown off Cammy's movement relative to her V skill. And the effect it has isn't usually very big.
Temple of Ascension. Kolin.
Or not, because this would be easier to actually
Kolin.
very well.
Cammy.
As you know, it doesn't make any difference because Cammy does not use her V trigger at all. So this is more so to show off the timing of her V skill. Different inputs of Cammy have different amounts of shimmy, and different rhythms vary slightly when it comes to this. The V gauge does not matter because it's noted she doesn't use it. As for your own meters, you can put them to whatever you want, but if you're familiar enough with Cammy Bot, you know what that is. So this is the same thing. Basically, exactly how often will she do this move? And will she walk backward before doing it? But the difference here is very slightly shifted. Because she tends to walk backward, you get a different interaction, but if her cannon spiking timing is different, other things in the bot change, which is the only reason we're showing off this move. It's fairly obvious what will happen if you have a version of her that doesn't shimmy as much on the walk back. But the important thing here, therefore, is to look for when she does jump, when she does do cannons strike, when she does shift into particular spots. You can get used to just not trying to click her legs fairly easily, honestly. It's not that common that you get to click Cammy's legs without trusting that you understand her timing anyway. Therefore, this is a lot more about a very obscure move that won't show up too often, so I'm kind of just waiting for her to do it once. As you can note, she does have the capacity to do different dash up things, do different walk up things. And even somewhere in there she has the capacity to do hooligan into something else. Normally, in order to achieve that though, you do turn off her critical gauge. And that will unlock her dive kick. It's not a good dive kick. It's not a well-timed dive kick. It's not usually a well-spaced dive kick. It's just not really helpful, except if you've never seen the move before and need to do a little bit of something relative to it. But it's still in there. You do have the option of doing this in order to make something work out. Because her ranges change on the hooligan, and her timing also changes in a way that makes the dive kick more likely. It also makes her play more footsies, which isn't really something you care about too much because she's mostly built to help you deal with throws, but it's in there. a more retreating Cammy that you'll get out of all this. But you can see there, if you were watching closely enough, that she's very likely that if she does do certain dive kick timings, it will follow them. Meaning that if Cammy has done an imperfect dive kick and therefore thinks it's now time to walk away from you or block, it becomes more meaningful. Again, she's so unlikely to do this that I don't feel as if we're going to get much of a demonstration on stream. But whenever she does do a dive kick, all you have to do is think about what would happen if she did her new B skill here, now. Because the old B skill would be no use there, by most people's standards, unless you were playing super defensive. And there's really no reason to play super defensive if you recognize that the dive kick was incorrect. So let's basically go with that. If the dive kick is not the greatest, and Cammy wants to get away from you and thinks you can't tell or that you have flinched in some way, that move is one of her better options for getting out of it. Walk back a little bit, and quickly hit it to catch any lows you want to do. If you have the original version of Cammy bot where she just always throws, this also won't help you. Basically, the skill changes on that version are basically useless. But you weren't supposed to have that version for too long. So, this works particularly well though if you have characters that have really long buttons that you like sticking out to people to keep them under control. Because she does make you vary and delay the timing. She's going to be ornery and not do it, but I can assure you that she can do it right here. So let's not push too hard on that. I'll give her a little bit longer. It's not really easy to force by changing inputs either, so I'm not going to bother trying that. Overall, thank you for putting up with my sniffly nasal attempts at explaining these things today. And you only have to do it one more time relative to this because we are almost done with our CE bot checkup. One more to go, and that one will be a little more complicated because we do need to get Lucia in there, and apparently some other variations possibly relative to Guile and Claw to resolve the other things that we didn't get done quite right. So look out for them on Friday. For now, enjoy Cammy's contrariness and refusal to do the thing I need to demonstrate for a couple more minutes before we close out the stream. You can find all of our bots at our website 2-mk.org, and all the information on what we are streaming on any given day on our Twitter 2_mk_FGC at around 7 Eastern. So it's a little later. If you don't see anything by 7:30, chances are we're not streaming. Mostly we will tell you so, but, you know, things happen. Even with as many of us as there are, doesn't always mean that we'll be coordinated by the time it takes to get that done. You can of course expect that we'll be working on Seth Bot the moment he's available, but that's another while out. So for now, unless we find some reason to develop another guild bot, expect that we are only doing one more bot related content for Street Fighter 5 for a bit. Therefore, this has been Urien along with Kansuki Dynasty. 14 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.